So you see here we have the bottom taken off of the Hotrod controller, and you can see all the parts inside the original board. We also have here the actual upgrade kit, which includes all the cables you're going to need, the PCB itself of course, PCB cable, and all the jumper wires. So the first thing we're going to do is actually take out all of the wiring in here, leaving the switches behind, but taking out all the wiring and taking out the actual board itself. Now with the wires out, we have to do something that's a little bit silly. It's the way the Hotrod was built. There's two screws on the PCB that are up underneath this lip, so you're gonna have to actually take off this whole base, which means taking off these screws you see around the base here. If you have a screwdriver that can get in there, that'll save you an extra minute, but really it's not a big deal to take these out. Next, we take off these final two PCB screws. Now, this is a very rare, hard to find Hotrod PCB. These are a rare, well, basically garbage. So the next thing we're going to do is put on the X-Arcade PCB. Start with the little white thingies on there and make sure these two connectors are facing to the outside as you see there. Then we put in our first screw. The next thing you want to do is put the PCB cable into the little hole with the little plastic clippy thing. See that there? So you want to put it here, like so. Okay. And you want to put it down under here, and squish it to death when you put it in here. It just fits just like that. Now we're going to plug those in to the PCB like so. Now put these screws back in again. Next comes the PCB cables. Look at that mess. We have to put all of this onto all of that. It's not as bad as it looks because they're labeled very nicely for you. All these have their jumper numbers on them. Jumper 8 here. We'll go ahead and plug that into the joystick here. So don't forget everything's upside down. These are labeled, which makes your life a little bit easier. So you'll notice that each jumper is actually a batch of 5 wires for the buttons, and that's because there's one ground for 4 set of buttons. So for example, this is jumper 6 here, and this is going to be player 1 button 6, button 8, button 3, and button 7. And these are obviously 2, 4, 5, and 1. So it's this little set here. So basically, next thing you want to do is start plugging those in. Again, this is button 1 on the player 1 side when you have it flipped over. So let's go to it. There's no button 8, so you can just leave that there. You can put it up here and wire tie that down. If you want to add an extra button here, you can do so. It'd be like the X-Arcade here and here. That's up to you. Next, we're moving on to the player 1 and 2 start buttons and the right and left pinball buttons. The last thing is the mode button and the mode switch, which we did connect to the PCB. Now, the hot rod controller does not have a spot on the back to put the switch. There's no hole there big enough for it. Same with the mode button. It's up to you if you want to add your own hole and screw that in and add another button to change modes. This is only used for programming. Most emulators and so forth have controller options, so programming isn't used as much these days. Back when emulators first came out, they didn't actually have a lot of control configurations, but you'll find most do now. So for the most part, you can either leave this inside, make yourself a new hole, or you can actually even leave the switch off and that'll keep it in mode 1 at all times. Also, this LED, there's no place built in for the hot rod to have this LED show. You don't actually need it. It shows you power, it shows you programming, so if you added the programming to it, you can drill yourself a little hole and put this light down in there, use a little hot glue or glue, and glue it in, and you should be good to go. Now, the last thing you'll want to do before you go ahead and tie down these wires is just go ahead and use our PC plug to plug it into the USB port on your computer. Use the test program that's on the support page of our website at xgaming.com. Make sure that everything's working properly, and after it is, just take you some wire ties like so. You can get these at any hardware store, what have you. And you just want to go in and just bunch these together. And just make it look nice and clean. Once you're all finished, you now have a hot rod controller with X-Arcade electronics inside, which means not only can you now plug it into the USB port of your computer, but you can also use the included console cable to buy our game adapters and also make your hot rod now work on consoles. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and enjoy your new hot rod X-Arcade.